بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
Hello, welcome to Islamic Civilization. This time session 16 that deals with Umar the Great, the second caliph in Islamic history. And so we would go through the achievements of Umar the Great, the changes that he brought, and how he broke with the previous empires, and how he continued also with some of the good things that the previous empires had. So again, we are going to be dealing with the empire making process in Islam that were based on conquest and the changes that Islam brought. So let's see what we have in session 16 that deals with Umar the Great, Caliph Umar. And so this is the caliphate of Umar that stretched from 634 to 644 for about 10 years. So let's see what he did. So for the objectives are concerned, in this session, we would talk about the caliphate of Umar, how he conquered Byzantine and Persian empires, established state system based on social welfare, justice, and accountability, and these are some of the things that really made him the great. Also, how he created a system of treasury and a paid standing army. And you would see in his time more conquest, but less forced conversions. And that was coming from the previous caliph, Abu Bakr, the same system, and would continue also in his times. So let's see what we have in session 16 and how Caliph Umar carried out the conquest, and at the same time he created a new system in Islam. Okay. So the caliphate of Umar, Umar the Great. And so this is again the same thing going against empires, especially the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid empires. And as you know, both these empires, had been fighting for centuries. As we also discussed this in the previous session, the Byzantine Empire was the Greek Christian Empire, and the Sassanid Empire was the Persian Zoroastrian Empire. So they had racial as well as regional and religious differences for which they were fighting. So their hostilities, enmities and fighting, had a long history from 500 BC to 600 AD. It's about, for 1,000 years they had been fighting. Persians destroyed the Acropolis in 480, as we said last time, 480 BC before Christ. And in retaliation, almost like more than 100 years later, Alexander the Great, he would burn Persepolis, the capital of the Persian Empire, in 330 BC. Between the two of them, Arabs, Turks, and Syrians were caught in the Greco-Persian imperial wars. And that really meant a lot for the spread of Islam, how these people felt relief when both these empires were brought down by the Islamic empire. Okay. Going further, so here you see the Persian Empire going against the Greeks, then the Greeks going against the Persians, and in between all these people were caught till the Muslims, Arabs from the south, Mecca and Medina, came and brought down both empires and freed a lot of people, and that is how it led to the rise of Islamic empire and the Islamic religion in the region also, as so many people converted to Islam. Continuing with the theme, right here you see on this map between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea in the north, and between the Persian Gulf and the Eastern Mediterranean in the south. And think about it, if you look at these coming and going and fighting between the Persians and the Greeks, a lot of people suffered. War is never easy, and especially if you are caught between two superpowers, and that's what it was, these two superpowers, the Byzantine Empire and the Persian Empire. Continuing with the system, going against empires, Muslim conquest during the time of Umar Caliphate, Byzantine Syria was conquered in the Battle of Yarmouk, and that all happened in the time of Umar the Great, okay, when he was the caliph. Byzantine Syria was occupied by Byzantine, and so the Muslim came, and in the Battle of Yarmouk in 636 AD, they defeated the Byzantine army and captured Syria. Similarly, the Muslim armies, they captured Iraq, which was ruled by the Persians in the Battle of Qadisiyah, 636 AD. They also captured Jerusalem, Byzantine, which was also in the hands of the Byzantine in Palestine, Jerusalem in Palestine, 637 AD. They also captured Egypt, which also was under the Byzantine rule in the Battle of Alexandria, 641 AD. And then in 642, in the Battle of Nehevand, almost entire Persia was brought under the Islamic rule or the Islamic Empire. So as you see, during the time of Caliph Omar, you have a lot of battles, and these battles you should know also that the number of Muslim soldiers in each and every battle, the number of Arab Muslim soldiers were far less compared to the imperial army and the numbers of the imperial army, that of the Byzantine and the Persian Empire. What happened was, in most cases, the local people, they turned against their former imperial officers and joined the Muslim army. And that is why it's not denying the fact that there was no bloodshed and there was no fighting. Oh yes, there were a lot of fighting, but most of the fighting was done in few days, and the sieges ran into maybe 2 or 3 months. And that is the reason, although there was fighting, but the bloodshed was not as much, because the local people turned against their former imperial regimes and joined the Muslim army. And so that is the reason Islam spread quite quickly. More and more people came to Islam, and that is how Islam, the Islamic Empire expanded so quickly. That is one major reason. And I want to emphasize it right here, because you would be surprised with what spectacular speed the Islamic Empire spread from, Spain in the west up to India in the east. And that is just, phenomenal spread of the Islamic Empire. So let's continue with the presentation. Going against empires. Muslim Arab armies freed peoples, and this is also from the last lecture, non-Muslim Arabs and other living under the Byzantine and Persian rule. So all these people got their freedom. Most people lived as serfs under their previous landlords. Landless agriculture workers, most of them were agriculture workers, landless and craftsmen. They were heavily taxed and overdrafted, made to fight against, the other empire. And so with the coming of the Islamic rule, Muslims took land from the Byzantine and the Persian landlords and gave it to the peasants, the local people, and that is how this economic achievement, so to speak, and this economic incentive did miracles for the people to convert to Islam, because they could see the difference between the Muslim rule and the previous Byzantine or the Persian rule. So going with the program, let's see what is next. The new Islamic empire versus old imperial systems. So as I said that there was a change, big change, but at the same time you should know that some of the good things that the previous empires had, they would continue also in the new Islamic empire. So let's see what were some of the things that the Sassanid Empire, Persian Empire had. It had, coins, and it had a lot of, the administrative structure already there. So here you see, the powerful King Khosrau, a scene from, the hunting scene, and that was, turned into like a sort of a coin. Here you see the Darius Sphinx, and some of these, un-Islamic activities or features of the old empire later on Muslims would also adopt. Okay. Here you see King Khosrau II, about 600 after Christ, peace be upon him, the coin of Persian King Khosrau II. The Byzantine Empire had its own coinage, and here you see Emperor Justinian II, about 700 AD. And so these items of the state and the system, administrative, rule, Muslims would adopt. And it would look like if a system in the old empire worked for the people, for the administration, they might continue with it. If it was based on injustice, Muslim would replace it with justice. If it was the sort of the exploitation of the people, Muslim would definitely change it and make it more and more beneficial for the people. So there you would see a big change with the coming of Islam in these regions. And so that's why I want to make you aware of the fact, what was it that Islam brought, how it changed things. And if something was, working well, they would not, break it, they would not discard it. And so that's how some of the good things of the old empires continued under Islam. So let's see in the presentation, Islamic Empire. So here you see close to about 700, Caliph Abdul Malik Marwan, he, adopted the coinage of the old empire, the Byzantine and the Persian Empire. What he did was just wrote, the Shahada or the Kalima of Islam, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, on the, on the edges, which means that there is no God except Allah, and Muhammad is, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Muhammad is his prophet. So in Islamic Empire, you see two things. One, gold coin was called dinar, and the silver coin was called dirham. And both were used before Islam and after Islam for quite some time. Dinar and dirham, these were the gold and the silver coins that Muslim empires, kept and used it for their own benefits. Okay. Continuing with the presentation, Caliph Umar in Jerusalem. This is a very interesting story. The Muslim commander Umar ibn al-As, he took Jerusalem without bloodshed in 636 AD, and he invited Caliph Umar to enter Jerusalem. And there is a big distance between Medina, which was the capital of Islam at that time, and Jerusalem, which was the capital of Palestine at that time. And so why he would ask Caliph Umar to come all the way to Jerusalem? Because Sophronius, the patriarch of Jerusalem, that is like the great leader, the religious Christian leader of Jerusalem, he made this condition that he would surrender only to the Caliph. And so it meant if the Caliph did not come, there would be bloodshed. That's what it meant basically. And so Umar was, the Caliph was informed that he had to come to Jerusalem, because if he did not come, there would be bloodshed, because he would not surrender, and there would be a siege, and there would be trouble between the two people. So he said, okay, if that would solve the problem, he would come. So he came to Jerusalem and met Sophronius, Father Sophronius, the patriarch of Jerusalem, the Christian leader, and he surrendered and gave the keys of Jerusalem to Umar the Great, the Caliph of Islam. And let's see what else we have in this presentation. So Caliph offered the covenant of Omar. That's what it's called. The covenant of Omar, he offered to the people of Jerusalem. And let's see what is there in that covenant. Number one, there would not be any forced conversions. If anybody wanted to convert on their own, that's fine. Freedom of religion and worship was guaranteed. Protection of the churches and the crosses, that was guaranteed also. This is very important, this protection of the churches and the crosses in Jerusalem. Because Jerusalem had changed hands between the Greek Byzantine Empire and the Zoroastrian Sassanid Empire of the Persians. And in between, you should know, churches suffered, and people suffered, of course, also. So in one of the invasions of the Persians upon Jerusalem, they came, and just to annoy the Christians, they took the true cross to Persia. This was the cross, the story was, upon which Jesus had been crucified. This cross was discovered in about 350 after Jesus, by the mother of King Constantine. And so it was a very important, item, religious item, symbolic as well as, substantive. And so the Persian, just to annoy them and infuriate the Christian, they took the cross with them. Later on, the Byzantine would recover it, and then again they would lose it. And so now it's completely lost. So that's why Umar the Great, he made sure that no Muslim or anybody else would touch churches or these crosses. So the religious symbols of Christianity were, protected at that time. Later on, you would see, one mad Muslim king would even burn the Church of Sepulchre. And that would create, a big problem between Christian and Muslim, and eventually would lead to the Crusades. And so that's why I wanted to tell you that Umar, he had this great foresight, and that's why he was called Umar the Great, that churches must be protected, religious symbols must be protected, they should never be destroyed. Okay, let's see what else in the covenant of Umar. So he also said that non-Muslims, they would become Dhimmis, and so Dhimmis means the protected people. So non-Muslim would be protected by the Islamic Empire in the region, especially in Jerusalem. And they could keep their property, but they had to pay jizya, a head tax, a poll tax, and so Muslim would pay their own taxes, but non-Muslim would pay this one tax, jizya. It's a very controversial tax. There's really no right or wrong, description of it, but you have to take it, as it comes. Okay, so non-Muslim, they had to pay jizya. Local Christians were allowed to stay. However, the Greco-Roman soldiers, they were forced out of Jerusalem. They had to leave, because if they stayed, that meant trouble. Christian asked the Caliph to oust the Jews, and that's exactly what he did. And the reason was there was too much, hostility between the Christian and the Jewish people in the Holy Land. Okay. So the Caliph promised peaceful passage to those who wanted to leave Jerusalem, along with their belongings and their, whatever they wanted to take, they could, although they couldn't take land and their homes, they had to stay. And but at least their life was, their lives were saved and they were let go. Staying with Caliph Umar in Jerusalem, the Caliph declined Sophronius' offer to pray in the Church of Sepulchre. Very interesting. Father Sophronius, the patriarch, he believed that if the Caliph prayed in the Church of Sepulchre, then Muslims would not, destroy this church. That's what his belief was, because this could happen in the war. And so, as I said, between the Persians and the Greeks, they've been doing these things, horrible things, destroying each other, religious places, even before, the rise of Christianity. Just as I said, Alexander, he went all the way to Persia and burned Persepolis when he was conquering Persian Empire. And because 100 years ago, the Persian had destroyed the Greek religious, symbol, Acropolis. And so the burning of and the destruction of the religious symbols and religious places, that was a common thing. And so Father Sophronius, or Patriarch Sophronius, he believed that if Umar, the Caliph, prayed in the church, that would become sacred. And so Muslim would not, damage this church. That was a good idea. However, Umar had something else in his mind. Let's see. Umar believed that no, he should not pray in the church. Why? Because later on Muslim could claim the church, that here our great leader prayed, and so we have a right over this church. So to stop that type of a claim in the future, Umar declined Patriarch Sophronius' offer to pray in the Church of Sepulchre. By the way, Church of Sepulchre is the church, according to Christian theology and Christian history, that is the church where Jesus was buried. He was crucified, according to Christian, history. And so that place was enclosed in this church by the time of King Constantine. So it was already by the time of Umar and Sophronius, it was, like a more than 300 years old church, very historic church at that time. And so very important in the history of Christianity, in the religion of Christianity. People, still this day, they go and make pilgrimages to the Church of Sepulchre, where Jesus was, thought to have been buried. Do not confuse this Church of Sepulchre with the one this is in Jerusalem. Do not confuse it with the one in Bethlehem, which is the Church of Nativity, and that's the place where Jesus was born. So that place was also turned into a church, and both are, very important churches in the history and the religion of Christianity. Okay, let's see what else we have. So the Caliph prayed outside the church, and there a mosque was built, which is still called, the Mosque of Omar. And thank goodness he did not pray inside the church. Otherwise, as he believed, it could be a problem later on, and Muslim might claim it. Okay, so what you see today, in Jerusalem, you have these two monuments: the Mosque of Omar and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, just in walking distance, from one another. And I believe we have right there. So on the right, the dome, the smaller dome that you see, that is the Church of Sepulchre. On the left, you see the minaret, and that is the Mosque of Omar. On the left is the place where Jesus was, was crucified according to the Christian history. So what you see here in this picture in Jerusalem, the Church of Sepulchre and the Mosque of Umar, coexisting for centuries. And these were, the church was built in 300, 4th century AD, and the Mosque of Umar was built in about, 7th century AD. So I wanted to mention that the two coexist till this day. Very interesting story that the Caliph Umar, he was given the keys of the Church of Sepulchre by Patriarch. And so the Caliph gave it the keys to a Muslim family, the Nusaybi. So the Nusaybi family, which is a Muslim family, till this day holds the keys to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And they are very proud of this, tradition that is, for 1,000 years old, more than 1,300 years old, and they're very proud of this duty. So every day, one of them would go, the Muslim family, member of the Muslim family would go and open the church early in the morning to the people, because there are always, Christian pilgrims. They want to go inside. And so in the morning they would open, and then would go in the evening and close it. And so the next morning, and this has been continuously going on for more than 1,300 years in Jerusalem, that this Muslim family performs this very Christian, duty of opening of the church. Occasionally, the Greek Orthodox as well as the Catholic, and I believe also the Armenian church leaders, they would come and ask the Nusaybi family to keep the keys with them, and they accept the tradition and the honor of keeping the keys with them. So maybe you can do also some online research on it, how the keys came in the hands of the Muslim family. But they were given directly by Umar Caliph. Okay, the Caliph of Islam, Umar the Great. Let's see what else we have. Now later on, about some time later, the place that was visited by Umar, that place would also become very important in the history, and they would build, Muslim would build this Dome of the Rock. It is not because of Umar, but he made sure that this place is kept clean. Why? Because from this place, which is now dome, there is a rock, and from that rock, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in peace be upon him, in the Muslim tradition and Muslim history, he ascended to heavens. So that is why Jerusalem and this Dome of the Rock is important for the Muslims. So Jerusalem is holy to the Jews, to the Christians, as well as to the Muslims. And it is because of the Dome of the Rock and the religious attachment of the Muslims with this place. Okay, let's see. Going against empires. So the Caliphate conquered Byzantine Empire, Syria, Palestine, and Egypt, as I said. More people gained land and freedom, as we talked previously. More people converted to Islam. Okay. They entered the army and the bureaucracy of Islamic Empire. A lot of them became, empowered. The majority of the local people became empowered. And Arabs remained minority in foreign lands. And that would play a major role in the making of Islamic Empire, that you should know that most of the Islamic Empire was built by the local people, although headed and led by the Arab armies. Expansion of Islamic Empire. Right there you see in 632, by the death of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, you had Islam, in Mecca and Medina and Taif on the eastern coast of the Red Sea. In 634, you have entire Arabian Peninsula, even Yemen and modern-day Oman, and up to, Syria and Iraq, southern Syria and western Iraq. By 634, by the death of the first Caliph, Islam had spread so quickly. Okay. Staying with the expansion of Islam, Islamic Empire, and by the death of Umar the Great in 644, Islam had spread just like a phenomena. In the West, it spread up to, the west of Egypt and west of modern-day Afghanistan, and way beyond, further north, in the Caucasus, close to the modern day Turkey. And so what you see here is the expansion of Islam going north, east, and west. And so it would continue within 100 years. You would see Islam in Spain as far west as Spain and as far east as modern day India and Pakistan. So let's continue with the presentation. Expansion of Islamic Empire. The Arabian Desert expanded, as we talked about it last time, to the Fertile Crescent between Egypt and Iraq. Older empires and civilizations, Muslims came in contact with them. North Africa, South and Eastern Europe. That's how Islam went. Persia, Western China and India. Central Asia, all the stand countries like modern day Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, all these places came under Islamic rule. So it started with the Arabian Desert, but then it went into the greatest fertile lands in the region. Okay. Continue with the expansion of Islamic Empire. The army structure in Islamic Empire, I just want to emphasize one more time. Arabs, they remained minority, but they were at the top level, as it was to be expected. Non-Arabs at mid and lower levels in the army. Local talented soldiers became more assertive, as I said last time, and they reached to the top. And it had to happen anyway. Non-Arab people spread Islam further. And that is one point that I really want to emphasize, that if you think that a couple of hundred Arabs could do this thing, spread Islam so massively, that's not really the case. Arabs spread it to the Persians spread it further east to the Afghanis spread it further east to modern day Pakistan, and they did it to modern day India. Similarly, in the West also, the Arabs spread it to Egypt, and from Egypt and then further west up to Morocco. Most of these people, North African people, as they came into Islam, then they spread it to other people, even into Spain. And so that is how Islam spread. Yes, a few Arabs did go to Indonesia, Malaysia, and that region became so massively Islamic that today Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world, with a huge, big Muslim population. And so, and without any fight, that's another amazing thing about Indonesia, the spread of Islam in Indonesia through trade and business. So it was not just only one-way conquest, it was also commerce and trade and business and coming in contact, and people realizing that they had a better deal compared to the previous imperial masters, especially Persians and the Byzantine, the Greek. They believed the Arab deal or the Islamic system was far, far better, and that's how they accepted Islam. Okay, let's see further. Staying with the expansion of Islamic empire, the new Islamic order that came into being, people were no longer tied to the land as they used to be under the Persian and the Byzantine. More people entered commerce and crafts. More trade spread in Islamic empire, and that's how Islamic empire would become known for trade and business. Spain in the west, that is Europe, to China in the east, that is Asia. And that's how trade and business would go between east and west, Europe and Asia. For the first time under Islamic empire, more people moved for business purposes because there was peace. Scholarship and craftsmen also, transferred from one place to another place because the land belonged to Islam, and Islam was the main religion in the region. And it's most people, the scholarly people, they spoke Arabic, and that's how Islam and Arabic spread trade and business and relation between the people. The new Islamic order. Religious and dietary separation of people. You should know this, that under the Islamic empire, This is somehow considered to be a strange feature of the new Islamic order. What Muslims did, they separated people by their religious denominations, which meant that people belonging to the same religious group, they should stay within their own group, so that there would be less friction and fighting among the people of different religious groups. So Jews should stay with the Jews, Christian with the Christians, Muslim with the Muslims. And that helped. Another thing is dietary laws were different. The Jews did not eat pork, the Christian did, and so that might cause problem. And even, you know, today in India, Hindus, they don't eat beef, but Muslims do. And this can easily cause problem between the two communities, Muslim and Hindus in India. When Muslims, they slaughter a cow and eat beef, that can be, you know, offensive to the Hindus, and so the problems start. That's how, you know, for one cow, 100 Muslim can be killed in India. And so that's what's called the communal, you know, fighting sometime in India happen. And so in Islamic Empire, people were told to stay among their own communities, so there would be much more peace and prosperity among the people, and less friction and less fighting among the people. Let's see what else. So people, they had to stay separated among their own religious and dietary communities. Law and order and leadership was maintained. So in the Jewish and Christian and Muslim communities, this was the duty of the Christian, the Jewish and Muslim leaders to maintain law and order. One more thing, Muslim and Christian and Jewish law was applied to their own people, and they had their own courts. So which means, yes, the rule belonged to the empire belonged to the Muslims and Islam, but Islam did not have to be imposed upon Jews and Christians. If they wanted to be treated by their own laws, by their own people, they had that freedom. And so they did not have to be dragged to the Muslim, you know, judge or to the Muslim court and tried under Islamic law. Otherwise, there would have been a big problem. For example, Muslims don't eat pork. And so if you eat, that is haram, that is unlawful, and you can be, you know, punished for that, but you cannot impose that law, Islamic law of Sharia, on a Christian. And similarly, if Jews don't want to eat pork, fine, but you cannot force the Jewish law upon Christians who do eat pork. And so that's how, what it meant, everybody had the right to be treated under their own religious and dietary laws, and that kept peace among the people. Okay, let's see what else. So this kept peace and prosperity. Less conscription meant also more agriculture. So people did not have to be, you know, drafted again and again, and so that meant that they could engage in agriculture, and that was a good policy. Okay. Middle Eastern and Eurasian trade flourished, and because there was no inter-empire fighting. So Muslims were not fighting with the Jews, Jews were not fighting with the Christians, Christians were not fighting with, you know, the Jews. Otherwise, if you look at the history of the Jewish presence in Eurasia, they suffered a lot at the hands of the Christians, basically. And so wherever there was the Islamic empire in place, Christians could not dare to molest any Jew. And that created peace. And sometimes peace had to be enforced, like even these days. Peace had to be enforced, and that led to peace and prosperity, more business, more commerce, more communication, more traveling among the people, because there was the Islamic new order in which one community could not oppress the other community. But each one was identified according to their own religious laws and their religious needs. Okay, let's see what else. Expansion of Islamic empire, the new Islamic order. Muslim paid the obligatory zakah, which is called the poor tax, and we covered this in the practices of Islam. Non-Muslim, they paid jizya, the poll tax or the head tax or the census tax. And they also paid kharaj, that is agricultural tax. Muslim paid khums, that's another tax on agriculture. And they, for paying the jizya and the kharaj, the poll tax and the agriculture tax, non-Muslims were exempted from jihad or the military service. And they were happy to do that. Jizya exemption was also extended to non-Muslim poor people because they didn't have the money, so why they should pay. And also to disabled people, disabled men, monks, churches, women, and children, they were also exempted from the jizya payment. And that was good for the people. The administrative reforms of Umar the Great, let's see what happened on that front. Caliph Umar reforms. He reorganized Baytul Mal or the treasury. He made everybody, sure to know this, that this treasury belonged to common Muslims, not just to the rulers and their leaders only. And that was a big problem because these rulers, they went and conquered a place or whatever they did, they believed that everything belonged to them. And Umar told them that was not so. The treasury belonged to common Muslims. Taxes and revenues belonged to the people's treasury. Nobody could take tax from the people and pocket it, the rulers pocket it, and keep it for themselves. No, they had to go to the people treasury. Widows and poor people had more rights, and rightfully so. They had to be taken care of, and so the people treasury was meant also for the widows and the poor people in the Islamic Empire. He also created what is called Diwan, or a department of pensions or a book of pensions. This was a new thing that he started, although some people believe that it continued from the Prophet also, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He maintained regular and transparent bookkeeping, very important, so nobody could, cheat. Preference was given to the people who had suffered the most for Islam, and that was also, the right thing to do. He established a standing army that had to be paid from the treasury. He also created Qazi system, the justice system in entire empire, and that was also good, so that the system would be like one system throughout the empire. And because it was based on the Quran and Hadith, these two great sources, that is the reason it was, a sort of a system that could run not only just in Mecca and Medina, but it also could be applied easily in Cairo or in Syria, in Damascus, and anywhere else where Islam and Muslims were. So the system was quite unique in the way that it was based on the Quran and Hadith. So no matter what culture there was, what language was spoken, still people could come and benefit from the Islamic justice system. And it created a sort of universality for Islam, and people would know definitely. Even if they were in Spain, they knew what the law was and what their, the expectations were. So for the law was concerned, the administration was concerned. So that universality and uniformity of the Islamic justice system that started from Umar the Great would continue, and it continues till this day. Everybody knows the law. It's a different thing that nobody, would obey it. And so that's how, the system till this day works under the Islamic Sharia law. Let's see what else. Caliph Umar's reforms. He stopped Arabs from owning conquered lands. Very difficult thing, but he achieved it. And the reasons were simple, that the conquest were not for land grab or for colonization. It was meant to spread Islam and bring peace to the people. He also feared that landlordism would decrease Arabs' martial qualities because they would become peasants and agricultural landlords, and they would become very sedentary. So he wanted them to stay like the old Arab Bedouin leaders, and that was for the good of the Arabs and for the good of Islam. So they should not be robbing local people of their lands, and that was the main difference between the Islamic rule on the one hand and the Persians and the Byzantine rules on the other hand. People did not own lands. They just worked for their Persian and Byzantine landlords. In Islam, they own lands and they work for themselves. So if the Arabs came and became the new rulers and the new landlords, then there was no difference. And that's why Umar believed that Arabs should not own lands, and he prohibited them. When he died, nobody could stop them anyway. But then there were not too many Arabs. These were not in thousands and millions that went and took the whole land from everyone. That did not happen. Local people were in charge of their lands. They became the landowners, under Islam, and that continues till this day. So let's see further. Caliph reforms. He also instituted Islamic Hijrah calendar, beginning year 1 from the year of Hijrah. Hijrah means Muhammad's migration, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, from Mecca to Medina in 622. So the 622 AD is the year 1 in Islamic calendar. And as you know, Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar with Muharram as the first month of the Islamic calendar. Okay. Assassination of Caliph Umar. Great as he was, till he was a human being and he could be killed, and because he did not have really too much protection around him. So his Persian slave Feroz, also known as Abu Lulu, he assassinated him during morning prayers. Some people believe Feroz was a non-Muslim Persian. Some people believe no, he converted to Islam and killed him. We really don't know the reasons. The real motives are not known. However, some people believe that most possibly he was still a Persian nationalist, and he resented the Arab conquest of Persia especially under Umar, the Caliph, the second Caliph of Islam, and so that's how he took revenge, and he killed the Caliph. So we really don't know for sure what happened between the two of them. The will of Umar before he died, he was stabbed. So before his death, he made a will, and the will of Umar was he told the next Caliph and the leaders, be kind to Muhajirun and Ansar. Muhajirun, those were the Meccan people who immigrated to Medina, and the Ansars were the local people of Medina who helped the immigrants from Mecca. Both were Muslims. So be kind to Muhajirun and Ansar. Do not overburden non-Muslim with taxes, which he kept very low. Also, continuing with the will, he told people administer justice even-handedly and take care of the people's welfare. Very important. Get guidance from the Quran and Sunnah, from the Quran and Hadith. He selected Usman as the third caliph by consultation. There is one thing when it comes to the will. This was his wish, and he he carried out himself his rule according to what he believed. He was a very strict person, very honest person, very transparent person, and very just person. That also made him a bit for other people uneasy, because he expected a lot from people in terms of the honesty, in terms of justice, in terms of the welfare of the people. He expected from the leaders. And so not too many people were, really, I wouldn't say did not like him, but they were not easy in his company because they thought that he would expect from them this and that, to behave in a certain way. So as long as he was alive, he ruled, he remained caliph for 10 years. All these things were in order. Perfect justice, perfect administration, taking care of the poor people. He even said, when sitting in Medina, he said, if a dog died of starvation on the banks of river Tigris in Iraq, God would hold him responsible. And so he believed that he was responsible for the welfare of the people in the Islamic empire. And that's how he always advised leaders, military and administrative leaders in the Islamic empire to be just and kind to the people. If anybody did not obey his order, he would fire them, and that's what he did. Even with the greatest commander of the Islamic army, Khalid bin Walid, when he came to know that he was becoming very boastful or he was not very transparent, so he fired him and replaced him with another person. So that's how he was very strict when it came to justice, especially the welfare of the people, for which he cared a lot. And as long as he was alive, everything was fine. And after his death, you would see a lot of problem rising. So let's go back to the presentation and see what else do we have. Well, you have a reaction report coming in session 16. So you need to write a note on the state institutional achievements of Caliph Umar, Umar the Great, who ruled from 634 to 644 AD. Now here is one thing. Maybe you could do your own research if you want. It's up to you. But I wanted to focus more on the institutional and administrative reforms. Definitely you can talk about, the spectacular conquest that he achieved of Syria, of Iraq, of Egypt, of Palestine, especially that of Jerusalem. So also, if you read a little bit more about him, you would also see a sort of a pattern and design in the lifestyle of Umar and the way he carried out his caliphate. And that was, if he could achieve, and that would be also a case with a lot of great Islamic leaders, if he could achieve his purpose peacefully, he would not fight. If he could convince people of the goodness of Islam, he did not have to impose upon them. If people would come on their own to Islam, he would not force them. And he never forced anyway, because forcing people into religion is strictly prohibited by Quran. If anybody forced Islam upon anyone, that would be his problem. Because in the Quran, one thing is very clear. La ikraha fid din, only a few words, which means no force in religion. Meaning you cannot force people into Islam, nor you can force Islam upon them. So that he was also very strict on that count, that he would not, force people in Islam, even if he had, a very commanding position in Islam, especially in Jerusalem. However, in speaking of Jerusalem, he would not force Islam on Christians and Jews. And that's how they remained, in Jerusalem till this day, because they would not be forced by Muslim to convert. If somebody did that, on their own, that's a different reason. For whatever reason they converted, that's a different story. But no force of Islam upon people. That was a Quranic law, a Quranic order, la ikraha fid din, no force in religion. One more thing about Caliph Umar was that he would like to continue the system of the previous Caliph, Abu Bakr, and that of the Prophet, the lifestyle of the Prophet, the Sunnah of the Prophet, And he believed that those were the great models for Islam. And that is why when you see him present, you see in him more of the previous caliph and more of the lifestyle of the prophet. And this would, for the good caliph, so to speak, for the good rulers, that would become sort of a system to carry on, a behavior to carry on. And the greatest thing and the simplest thing was to be good with the people. To be good with the people, taking care of the people. The more you take care of the people, the more you are good with the people, especially with the non-Muslim, the more you could convince them of the goodness of Islam, and the more they would come into Islam. So that's why I wanted to emphasize some of the great things about Caliph Umar, strict as he was, but in a very nice and a good way, in the sense that he stood for justice, he stood for the welfare of the people, and you also see how much Islam expanded or spread during his time. Let's see what else you have right there in review. Well, we covered a lot. Caliphate of Umar for the 10 years. He defeated the Byzantine and Persian empires, reorganized a transparent treasury, created Diwan, the book of pensions or the department of pensions, quite a new thing for those times, established a paid standing army, stop Arabs from owning conquered lands. I say that was a good policy. So stay engaged. If you have any questions, any comments, please let me know. And always go to Laulima, check your messages. And through the messages, we can communicate. Also check your assignments. And those assignments, you could be a little bit, creative on them. Although I want you to stay with the session, but at the same time, I would also like you, if you want to do your own research, you are most welcome. So that is the end of session 16, and see you with session 17 next time. Thank you very much. Aloha.